Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have an interesting and eclectic mix of CEOs on stage for you today. Let me quickly introduce them to you, if I can get the technology to work. There we go. Gerald Lawless. Gerald's a long time 15-year stint with Jumeirah, and before that 23 years with Forte, and a member of the executive committee and vice chairman of corporate governance at WTTC, and actively involved also with the World Economic Forum. Jumeirah has 20 properties under management. Big expansion in China, so Gerald's been very busy and focused on China, and has now been turning his mind to India, I guess, with the signing of the Mumbai project late last year. Gerald, if you want to add anything that I've missed out or not emphasized, please feel free to do so.
No, just about, I would say that the focus very much for Jumeirah, as well as India and China, is really as well in our home region of the Middle East, and we're currently involved in a large number of projects there, that particularly in Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, in Muscat, in Oman, and we're opening shortly in Kuwait. So the Middle East region is also very important for us right now.
Excellent. All right. Moving on to Meinhard Huck. Like Gerald, Meinhard has been a long-time veteran at Swissotel after a similarly long spell with Holiday Inn International. Swissotel have 43 hotels, though most of those are in Asia and in Europe, 37 in total, but across the two regions. Mostly, they have one or two hotels per country. There are perhaps a handful of countries in which they have more than 2 hotels. India is one of those countries now, with the opening of the Goa property. 3 more projects in the pipeline over the next few years in Bangalore, Mumbai, and Noida. So clearly, Meinhard is keen to build out in India. Meinhard, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you have summarized it very well. Thank you very much.
Okay. Moving on. Whoops. Abid Butt. Abid rejoined Banyan Tree. Actually, is a long timer at Banyan Tree, but rejoined recently, about a year ago. After having spent stints in Washington, in Hawaii, and is now back in Singapore. Major expansion underway at Banyan Tree, 33 properties currently, and a variety of other activities with spas, galleries, and some golf courses. He does a lot of traveling, 28 countries, and a major expansion underway, especially in China. Now turning your attention to India, we've had a presence in Bangalore with the Angsana, and now busy with the opening of the Kerala property at the end of this year. Much of that is focused, as I understand it, on South Asia. Anything else you'd like to add, Abid?
We've enjoyed a very good footprint in Asia. Our pipeline for development in China is very, very healthy. We're very happy with that. India is a very important market for us. So we obviously are looking for projects that best suit our brand portfolio and where we can bring the value.
Excellent. Last but not least, Jim Abrahamson. Jim is with Interstate and has held leadership positions at IHG, Hyatt, Hilton, and the Interstate footprint is much bigger than those of the other guys on the panel, with 350 hotels, almost 70,000 rooms. But most of those are in North America, 300 out of the 350. I guess secondly, many of those are select service hotels and extended stay properties. And I guess the third unusual factor that differentiates Jim's group from the others is that they operate both independent hotels and hotels that are with the other brands. I think 35 odd brands that you have. In India for a number of years, with 10 properties across India, and poised to double over the next few years. Anything else you'd like to add by way of introduction?
Well, I think we are unique in that area, Gautam, as you mentioned. And in India, we're really the only third-party operating company here, and we have agreements with major brands. We'd love to franchise with any of you gentlemen too. But we do have brand agreements, and we do have a very unique business model here in India, being singular in that area. And we can say the same thing about China, which not only gives us a great opportunity and advantage, it gives us almost a synthetic, monopoly in terms of us being able to deliver branded hotels to independent owners and operators. So I think it's a great business model for India, and we really are excited about our future here.
Okay. Just to complete the introductions, I thought before we kick off the formal proceedings, perhaps, guys, if you can keep those wanting their morning's scoop satisfied, if you can share with us one thing about you that is not generally known, just so that those who are looking for the morning scoop can be satisfied and be done. Jim, can I start with you?
Well, I think, we heard the other CEO panel, and I think everyone that has been in one of these chairs, we've all started in the business at an entry-level position, and I'm no different, working in the kitchen at the front desk. And then we also use this term very liberally, that we're really married to the business. Well, my first hotel job was as a front desk clerk in the U.S., and I ended up falling in love with marrying my boss, who was the front office manager. So I've literally married into the business at a young age, and 31 years later, she's still my boss, and we've had a wonderful life and a great career. And I'm glad she's back in the U.S. when I said that. But we've really had a great time together. So it was life-changing for me, and it's been a great career and a great marriage, and something that's not generally known.
Thank you. Gerald.
How can you follow that? No, something very boring. I do quite a bit of trying to keep fit, but I don't know if anybody ever uses the ergometer, the rowing machine.
Right.
Which they have a fantastic website, whereas the Concept 2 is called, where I've entered all my workouts since 2002. So I just recently passed 7 million meters,
I can pick up a few tips from
but
you.
there you go, that's it.
Excellent. Abid?
I'll talk a little bit about how I ended up in the business. I was actually aspiring to be a doctor. I have several siblings in the family that practice medicine, so that was the line to go to. And somewhere midway, I decided to give that up and came to the hotel business. And I remember my dad asking, what in the world is wrong with you? Why do you want to go into this industry as opposed to pursuing the medical profession? Because that's the profession that everybody had pursued. But I've truly become a hotel junkie. That's all I've done. I went to school for it. I've worked all around the world at this particular point, and really enjoyed it.
No, you're a doctor of people's hearts.
But there you go.
Okay.
Absolutely. I tell my brother, who's a transplant surgeon, I tell him people have to go and see him. They want to come and see me. So that's the difference.
Excellent. Meinhard.
I can follow a little bit on what Jim said. My wife, I married my wife. She was the front office manager. I was then her boss. Now she's my boss. But that's really not what I wanted to say. I think I started my business when I was 10 years old on a farm. My father was a farmer. And every September, you have the harvesting of the potatoes. And so one year I said to my father, look, Dad, let me organize the harvesting this year, if you don't mind. And so I mobilized all my friends at school to come harvesting the potatoes. And of course there was a set price which my dad always paid to all the workers during that period. So he gave me the money, and of course I then was expected to pass that money on to my school friends. Naturally, we've heard about OTEs and agencies and all that stuff earlier. Naturally, I kept back 20% commission for myself, so that's how I started my business.
Excellent, excellent. Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Now on to more serious matters. I'd like to begin by examining what draws you to India. And in particular, why now? I know, Jim, you've been here many years, and you've had beachheads, Meinhard and Abid, but really you're sort of entering the fray proper, or planning to enter the fray proper over the next few years. So I'd like to try and look at why now more than anything. Two, I guess, data points that might be worth considering in stimulating the conversation. Kaushik put up a rather interesting slide yesterday where he looked at foreign arrivals into India. And despite its intrinsic appeal, India seems as a country to attract not enough people, far fewer than many other countries. Syria, for example, I think was mentioned, even though the kind of troubles that they're going under. And quite apart from that, almost 2 to 3 times as many Indians go overseas, perhaps to 4 or 5 destinations, and that too regionally, Dubai and looking east in Southeast Asia. So, you know, when you've got a market where there aren't that many people who come here, and they face difficulties perhaps in getting here, and when you have a market that has these kind of performance characteristics, occupancy over the last 6 years that's been on a steady downward trend, a 10% decline from 68% in 2006 to now 58%. This is across 12 cities. And an ADR that has also declined by about 1,000 rupees, probably more if you adjust for inflation. Now, all of that, albeit in an environment when supply has been significantly enhanced in a booming economy. But when you have that kind of performance, and when you have the kind of challenges that you face with an outlook where there's likely to be a doubling, perhaps a trebling of supply over the next 5 years, where you have increasing margin pressure, you have a rising development cost, high financing costs, and uncertainty macroeconomically and politically. Why is India of appeal now? Anybody?
Well, I would say I think there's a fair amount of complacency in India about trying to attract international visitors to India, because everybody always says, well, look at the size of the domestic market and the middle class is growing so quickly that you don't really have to worry. But it was also interesting yesterday to hear that in contentions about India not being an expensive destination in terms of hotels. So we would have a different perspective naturally at the luxury end of the business to try to get to higher average room rates. But in work that's been done around the world by the World Economic Forum and the World Travel and Tourism Council, and indeed the UN WTO, to try to persuade governments to have a much more enlightened approach to travel visas, to first of all have an electronic visa platform, make it easy to apply for visas, to get visas, but ultimately they've coined this phrase of freedom to travel, where we're really trying to get governments to understand the benefits to their economies of travel and tourism, and in particular to to jobs, because jobs worldwide is reckoned to be something like 255 million jobs supplied by travel, tourism and hospitality, which is almost 10% of the world's labour force.
Right.
And they've also estimated that it comes close to about 9% of the world's GDP when you take into account the multiplying factor. And it's interesting to see that governments are beginning to appreciate that actually it is worthwhile looking at travel and tourism in a much more serious way to try to encourage international visitors. International visitors, by their nature of, especially if they come to India, they're going to want to spend probably more money than the domestic market. And will certainly enhance all these hotels that are opening and the supply that's coming on over the coming years. But yet it is very inconsistent in terms of the countries that do get free visas. I looked it up this morning on the internet, and it was 11 countries, and it doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason as to why these countries get free visas and others don't. And I guess there's a certain issue of reciprocity here, and are Indian nationals allowed to go into these countries? But we always make the contention that really, if you want tourists to come to your country, whether or not that other country is willing to let your citizens travel freely to their country is not the point. The point is you're here, you're selling a product, you're selling your tourism, and you want people to come. So we should get over our national pride, I would suggest, in many of these areas. Because at the moment you have Finland, Japan, Luxembourg, New Zealand, Singapore, Cambodia, Vietnam, Philippines, Laos, Myanmar, Indonesia, and I believe recently Russia, France and Germany have been added. But one would wonder why just the whole of the European Union, for example, hasn't been added. Why hasn't the USA been added to this? And I've often given the example of Dubai about 12, 13 years ago. We took the same contention to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed in Dubai to say, look, don't worry about the fact that the Europeans will not give GCC citizens free entry, though they're moving that way now, especially for the UAE. But why don't we just do it anyway and let people come freely to the United Arab Emirates? At that time, we had less than 1 million tourists visiting Dubai every year. Last year we had 10 million tourists into a state, not even a country, a state of a city-state of 2 million people.
Okay, so you think that may change?
So I think the whole visa issue, make it easy to buy, is the old sales maxim. I mean, why can't we do this, and how it would help the industry here in India?
Okay, all right. Jim, you're looking to double. Why now? What are the top 2 or 3 factors about India and where the market is that make you
Well, the statistics you quoted, Gautam, are good for our business model. So I'll talk not about investment and hotel ownership. We're not involved in the equity side of the real estate. So actually our business model likes a little turbulence in the market. So what we see in India too is the fact that yes, there'll be growth, yes, there'll be a domestic market, yes, there's a emerging middle class. So I think there's long-term fundamentals that are good. That will incent travel and will sustain, have sustainable growth over the long term. But when there's turbulence, as there is right now, it provides for a couple of opportunities. One, more demand for professional management. So we see that banks and other lenders are looking to have professional management. So for that independent owner in India, having professional management is going to be critical to compete. More sophisticated systems, revenue management, IT, employee systems. Those are the things that we bring to the independent owner that has, their own brand or an independent brand. So it's a good time for us to be able to provide professional management to that independent Indian owner. Secondly, with the brands, I think we saw a lot of statistics yesterday, and I know the materials that were left on the tables and that colorful brochure showed that there's an increased demand for brands, whether they're the international brands like the Marriott, Hilton, Hyatts of the world, or other brands. That branded hotels are becoming more and more in demand. And with what Gerald had said about inbound international travel, critical to have brands also for that kind of seal of approval. So our ability to manage all the brands and having 35 brands that we manage gives us a very unique perspective. So we can kind of take and pick and choose from what the brands do best and apply them independently, so we don't need to, as a branded hotel company, deliver strictly to the brand standards. We can provide some independent thinking to get the best return on investment for owners. So if you look at that opportunity to choose, pick and choose brands, so you don't need to select one brand, we bring a whole host of brands. And we're the only one that can operate for the branded hotel companies here other than the brands. Gives us a very unique business model for Indian owners. So I think that we're going to see some trading environment when you look at the statistics that are on the screen. I think we're going to see long term that these investments are going to be more fluid over time. Having, our business model allows for termination on sale, that allows for flexibility on exit. Those are the things that really drive our business model in North America. 90% of the hotels in North America are third-party operated. So we see the same dynamics here over a long term. So a little bit of trouble is good, a little touch of recession, not bad for us. And we can provide our systems and benefits and brands to help Indian owners prosper in a difficult market. So I think it's a good time for us, and we've been in business for 50 years. We're here for the long term.
So I guess the sort of the one-line summary would be that since a lot of hotels are being built, you feel you guys are very well placed to manage better performance than has currently been achieved by the existing players in the market.
Very flexible brands and independents, whereas we're pan-India now, we're as far north as Gulmarg, and we're in Kerala, and so we're throughout India, so we have a flexibility, and we have sales offices and revenue management throughout the country, so we've got a great infrastructure here, and it's really provides a real benefit to either the independent or branded operator.
Fair enough. Abid?
I think you've outlined some challenges that exist in India, but I don't know if those challenges are so different to any emerging market.
We'll come to the challenges. Let's just look at what attracts you to India.
Well,
and then we'll.
I was getting to that because you identified the hurdles that would prevent people like us being in India.
Right.
But what I was trying to get to is that any emerging market would go through that. India is going through that phase as well.
Okay.
Knowing the potential that exists in this market, not only for inbound travel, but also domestic travel. Domestic travel has just begun, and you're correct in saying that it was talked about for a very long time, but it has just begun. The growing middle class and all the things that has been talked about, I think India is primed for development. Not only that, for those of you that are sitting in the audience that are developers, they recognize what the lodging world can do from a real estate point of view. The multiples that can be taken through the development, putting a quality brand, a quality hotel in the area, that is propelling the development side of things.
Okay.
For us, it is attractive because we look for markets that are rich in cultural diversity. That's what our brands are about. So it fits like a glove within Banyan Tree, hence the reason we're here.
Okay, okay. So, I mean, a feeling that the Indian domestic leisure travel market is, instead of people going overseas, there will be a, if only they can have the Banyan Tree experience in India, they might not go to Thailand or elsewhere.
I think, yes, the people will continue to experience other destinations, and I think that's only healthy.
Right.
The inbound travel would grow because the governments get to recognize the value of tourism. In the most recent recession in the United States, some of the CEOs of big four brands that sat up at the stage yesterday, they were in front of President Obama and the Senate talking about easing the visa requirements because everybody recognizes that this industry adds to the jobs. Foreign exchange that comes in is unbelievable. And sooner or later, the governments recognize the value that tourism brings into each of the jurisdictions in each of the countries. India is still new in this game.
Excellent. All right. Meinhard.
Well, we've seen that the reason why we're only here now is because we haven't had an opportunity earlier. We've searched the market, if you like, for a number of years, and we entered the market about 2 years ago, as you mentioned in your introduction. But if you look at India in terms of a destination, it only can get better. The first 2 months of this year, the tourism industry has, or the tourism arrival has increased by 2%, which may not sound a lot, but for India, in terms of the real number, is a sizable number. The earnings for tourism has increased by, in dollar terms, by about 11%. And I think the question was asked earlier at an earlier panel, how do you see the future over the next 2 or 3 years? And I think the future for India over the next 2 or 3 years is going to be very positive.
Okay.
You mentioned the visa. That's obviously an issue. You used to get a visa for 12 months. Just recently, for whatever reason, it was decided that e-visas are only being issued for 6 months. I guess there are some reasons for that, but that obviously prevents people from traveling on an ad hoc basis. We have seen in China, the visa regulations have eased. For example, you can travel to Shanghai now on a 24-hour visa, and I think that will happen in India as well. If you look at India as a whole in terms of, and again we have heard this over the last 48 hours here, if you look at India as a whole in terms of international hotels being present, there are more international hotels in Orlando than there are in the whole of India, for example. So there's obviously a market here, there's an opportunity. As for your rate and your occupancy you're throwing up here, I think when you get more quality hotels, you will gradually also see more people traveling to India, and the occupancy will increase accordingly. So I'm personally not concerned about the occupancy. In fact, we did very well for the first 2 months of this year at 80%, and last year we finished something like 65% in our hotel.
Okay.
So I think that as we move forward, we will see a positive step. And for us also, like for everybody else, it is important to be in India because we heard that a lot of Indians are traveling abroad, and that for us is also good for our properties in the international market.
Okay. Weather notwithstanding, an important journey to make. Okay. Let's do some time travel. We're at the same conference 10 years on, same cast on stage. And I have to introduce, or somebody has to introduce the footprint and describe what's the scale, scope of your India business. Let's put you on the spot a little bit. What's the goal? What do you hope to have achieved 10 years from now in terms of percentage of revenues from India, number of properties, number of rooms, types of hotels, brands? Whichever way you want to describe it. Meinhard?
Okay. Well, 10 years from now, please send me a video. I shall be sitting in Bermuda somewhere, but nonetheless. I think that the way we are looking at India and indeed Asia as a whole is that we will have a substantial presence here in India. I hesitate giving you numbers because if I give you a number, then in 10 years' time you're going to say, well, look, Meinhard, you haven't achieved that.
Right.
But nonetheless, we will have a substantial amount of hotels here in India. We are on the threshold of looking at a slightly modified version of our Swissotel brand, and maybe Jim, you and I can have a conversation about that, which is tailor-made for secondary cities in India and in China or in Eastern Europe.
Interesting.
So I think we're going to have a strong presence here in India, not only with the Swissotel brand, but also with our 2 other sister brands, Fairmont and Raffles. And as you heard yesterday, the Fairmont Hotel in Jaipur just opened, and there will be more hotels.
Double-digit number of properties.
Absolutely, definitely.
Okay. Abid?
Currently, Indian market in our portfolio accounts for, I think, 5th or 6th top producing market, and this is our global hotels worldwide. For India, our goal is to be present in all the gateway cities. I think from a brand presence point of view, that's very, very important. Our organization is known for the resorts that we build, so we want to be in all the top resort destinations like Kerala, like Goa. And double digit for us would still be small numbers, but yes, that would be true. We want to bring the brand closer to the consumers. Currently, Indian consumers are traveling to our properties outside India, which we're very happy about, but I think we'll see some good following once we have hotels available in India.
Okay. Gerald, 10 years from now.
Yeah, I think
How many Jumeirahs?
I think that Banyan Tree, the Jumeirah brand, is very well known by Indians in India because of the frequent travel to Dubai in particular.
Sure.
And by the nature of the brand anyway, I think that we're not going to be huge, but I would certainly, again, say that we would like to be in the major gateway cities, particularly naturally, in addition to Mumbai, but New Delhi, Chennai, Bangalore. And you know, we started life as a resort operation with the Jumeirah Beach Hotel in Dubai, so therefore we still feel that we have key letterhead locations not only in cities to achieve, but also in resort locations. And I think very soon we'll be announcing a project in Goa, so that should happen within the next few weeks. And yes, we're not going to be huge. Will we have a second brand? Well, 10 years from now, I would say pretty likely that we will have a second brand as well, which should be moving pretty rapidly within India. And India will always be a major focus for what is almost a regionally based company like Jumeirah out of the United Arab Emirates.
Fair enough, fair enough. Jim, already at 10?
Well, I've got a different plan. 10 years from now, I'm going to be at a spa at a banyan tree. So I'm really counting on Abid to get his development plan in great place.
Jim, you don't have to wait for 10 years.
That's where I'm going to be, not here. I'll be with him. But my successor will be here, and I think we're going to look a lot like we do in North America. I think we could feasibly have 60, 80 hotels open, probably another 10 or 20 in the pipeline. So roughly, I think, a footprint that looks open, under development, and in the pipeline of about 100 properties. Major brands, the pressure on major brands to grow is enormous, and particularly the public companies that were up here represented yesterday are shifting their locus into franchising globally. Arne Sorensen said there's no jurisdiction in the world that they won't franchise. So I think you're going to see our footprint look on a microcosm more like it does in North America than it currently does in India. So I think more branded hotels, probably more major markets than secondary that we're in today. And always a good collection of independents, because I think that's an important part of the fabric of Indian culture, is the great independent hotels that are here, and that local flavor of India is so incredible, it has to continue to be a part. I really hope India doesn't become a branded destination for a lot of reasons. So I think that will be important to us as well. So I see a lot of growth opportunity for us over the next 10 years, assuming we all continue on the same trajectory as we are right now.
Times 3, times 4 kind of growth.
Easily.
Not unimaginable.
Not unimaginable. The base that we have today, I think we can double in 3 years, and I think we can double it again within that time.
Okay. A number of you have been active in China, and India is often compared with China. What are some of the differences between hotel markets, in India and in China that you think are important to take note of? Abid, given your expansion
China
push.
is going through mega developments, township developments, and that was talked about, I believe one of the speakers had talked about it yesterday, that India needs to develop additional towns, additional cities, otherwise the existing cities will all turn into ghettos. China is going through that development all over the country. It's a huge place, as is India. India is just starting that process, and Gurgaon is a prime example. A place that wasn't even on the map not too long ago now commands all the major Fortune 500 companies are based in that area, and it's sort of become a model for future development. It's live, work, play, all in the same area. Right. And I think there'll be more of that coming. China is just slightly ahead of it. So there are lots of similarities. Domestic consumption is going to be very high. It's starting out with China. I think India would be no different. I think there are more similarities than there are differences. Chinese governments are very actively involved in these township developments, and they're very actively involved in building the infrastructure and making sure that they facilitate, and they're the catalyst for a lot of the development. maybe India can take some of the best practices from countries around the region and try to implement it.
Okay. Meinhard, you were sharing some comments about the difference between the two markets. Perhaps you'd care to elaborate?
Yeah, I think that in China, the way how the development takes place in China is much more disciplined than I've experienced in India. Best practice, I think it's a good expression. And yes, the government obviously is much more involved, much more actively involved in the development in China. The infrastructure is right, the long-term plans are in place, they're being implemented, they're being adhered to. Whereas here in India, okay, we still face challenges in terms of, from a timing perspective, there are many delays for different reasons. And I think that as we move forward here in India, we need to look at that. From a government perspective, it's much more fragmented in India than it is in China. In China, it's much more centralized. And so therefore, due to the higher centralization, there's much more control.
It moves, exactly. Whereas we snake along.
Yes.
Okay.
And if I can just add, whilst in China they started building also cities outside the cities at some point in time, a lot of the, particularly in big cities, they've cleaned up, that's the right expression, the cities themselves, which obviously had an influence on the social environment as far as the locals are concerned, which had a bit of a backlash at some point in time, but that's being rectified now, and I think that they have a much more socialized environmental approach in developing the cities.
Okay, all right. Let's now turn to your approach to the market in terms of what you're hunting for or what you're targeting. The HVS owner survey overwhelmingly said that brands add value. I think the number was 92% versus 8%. What's the one thing, only one, guys, what's the one thing that stands out about your group that adds value to the hotel and which owners should sit up? You've got, Madhav, I think, said it, about 100 owners here. So you've got a good audience that owners should sit up and take note of. Jim?
Return on investment. Clearly, that is the number one issue that we provide owners. It's more efficient bottom line, and it's really, I think, running higher margins than the brands typically do.
Okay. Gerald?
Adding on what Jim said, because we have to say return on investment as well, but I would say certainly that we
Come on, they need to be able to choose between you.
Yeah, I know, I'm going to tell you. But I think that very much, we say that Jumeirah stay different. And I think that we do recognize that within the luxury branding, where we are, where we sit, that each hotel actually is an individual hotel. Each hotel has to be different to the other hotel, even if it's within Jumeirah.
Okay.
We say it has the golden thread of the Jumeirah culture, standards, everything going through it.
So it's distinctiveness.
We do recognize, and I think it's very important that a hotel has its own personality, it has its own character, it has its own sense of place within the community, because hotels are part of a community. And we've done this in various parts of the world, where we always say, for example, in London, we don't say Jumeirah London or Jumeirah Knightsbridge. In our naming, we say Jumeirah Carlton Tower, London. Okay. So we like to keep the personality, the character, and the identity of the hotel within the branding of the Jumeirah luxury brand.
Okay, perfect. Abid, the one thing that stands out about you?
Well, if I
They're looking through their binoculars, they need to identify who you are.
Well, first thing, I think brands are about emotional attachment. And that's what brands do. After you work through all the clutter that goes along with the brands, it's about how is it that one brand attracts and retains the consumers? Who do they relate to? And I believe that's what the developers look after, whether that brand would fit their particular development or not. Within our world, we are about romance of travel, and we are about personalization. We are about making sure that we understand a small group of people that we deal with, so that as they travel across the globe to different places that we go to, that they recognize what our brand is about. Return on investment, as has been said before, I believe that's the price of doing business. So without that, none of us would be around. But we attract a certain cadre of client base that has become a good follower within Banyan Tree because who we are, whether it's spa, whether it's the pool villa environment, or the resorty type environment, even though the hotel is in an urban location.
Okay. Meinhard.
Of course, the financial side, as mentioned before, is important. We drive in our brand very high margins, profit margins, that is, of course. But apart from that, the emotional engagement, as you mentioned, what I always say when we travel and when we come into foreign countries, we bring a little bit of Switzerland to you. There are a lot of people, they don't have the opportunity to travel to Switzerland, so we give them the opportunity to experience a little bit of Switzerland mixed with the local culture in whichever country where we are.
Swiss hospitality. Swiss
hospitality, but we have a lot of Swiss icons within our hotels. And the other thing I would say to owners who are sitting here, we are very focused on each of our hotels. We'll give it a consistent attention on a very regular basis. So I think that's our success at this point in time.
Okay. All right. Who do you get compared with by owners in terms of when you're competing for projects? Who are the people that you're going to be competing with, you think? 2 international names, 2 domestic names. Whoever wants to take it up.
Well, for us, so again, we're different than everyone else. It's fortunate and unfortunate we don't have competition. Meaning we're the only third-party operator. We're the only branded company. We'd like to have more competition to get the third-party business more robust in India. So competition would almost be a good thing. But so today we compete with the brands. We, they're currently expanding their footprint, and we've seen the fee structures change and become more competitive. But I think that's our greatest challenge. We'd like to see the brands, maintain their value proposition, and we'd like to come in and work side by side. But so I think there's that. We're competing for that same kind of expense line item for fees with the brands in their portfolio. So that's a challenge which is unique to us here in India that doesn't exist in North America or other areas where there's more third-party operating.
Okay.
And I think we compete in the space of, say, Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, Shangri-La, Mandarin, and on the local basis, on the national basis here in India, I'm sure companies like Oberoi and Taj will be very much.
Okay. Abid?
I think similar portfolio, as Gerald mentioned, Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, St. Regis, on Banyan Tree branded environment, and our secondary sister brand, Angsana, probably more competes with the likes of Renaissance, Swissotel, so that sort of stuff. That's typically when we are dealing with the developers, that's who we are up against.
Okay.
We have a number of brands we're competing with, and in fact, at the end of the day, it's always the successful hotel which is already in town. But I mean, if I have to name a couple of brands, obviously Hilton, Sofitel is a great competitor for us. They have sort of beefed up their brand over the last few years from 200 hotels, now only 800 hotels. They're a real competitor for us. The other area where we face challenges is with regards to the distribution. When owners say to us, look, Meinhard, you don't have enough distribution when I look at other hotels, and that is true, but nonetheless we're signing up a lot of deals. Why? Because we can convince our owners or future owners that our brand is different, it's a niche player, and my question always I ask the owners is, would you like to have another Interconti in town? Would you like to be part of another Hilton in town? Why don't you have a Swissotel? We're the only one in town, and that makes you unique as well. And that for us has worked so far.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let's now focus on a couple of different dimensions of what you're seeking to establish. Gerald, you mentioned you wanted to be in the major metros.
Yes.
No plans to set up a Medina at Jumeirah like property? That's a destination magnet that itself is where people will come and stay and
Sure, we'd love to do it. I remember years ago we had this owner from China who came to see us in Dubai to check us out and stayed at the Medina Jumeirah. And he had a very large site, it still has a piece of land actually, near the Great Wall outside Beijing. And he said, I want Medina Jumeirah outside Beijing near the Great Wall. And I said, yeah, good idea, but won't we make it a little bit Chinese architecture with the rooftops and everything? He said, no, I want it just like this. But I would love to do a Medina Jumeirah type resort, but very much in keeping with the Indian environment. And I think it was a superb idea in places like Goa.
1,000 rooms, three properties. I mean, that's self-contained kind of.
We have 874 rooms spread over 3 properties within the Medina Jumeirah complex, but it covers 110 acres.
Right.
And we're about to start building the last vacant lot that we have, where we will build another 430 bedroom hotel. We're hoping to start mid-year this year on that.
Okay. Abid, you're focused on South India, interestingly. Why South? What is it that draws you to the southern part of India?
South, specifically when we talk about Kerala and the Ayurvedic treatments that are available, and it's been around for hundreds of years, it fits in very well. South has also been in the tourism market for a little while, so it just so happened that it fits perfectly. But as I mentioned earlier, that we are interested in being present in metro markets. If I may pick up what Gerald was talking about, we have developed integrated resorts as destinations. Most recently, and the grand opening is going to be in a couple of weeks, in central Vietnam, we've developed Laguna Langko. There is really nothing around the area. We've gone in, and it's a mega development with about 5 different hotels. We're opening up with 2 and a golf course. It'll have residential component, multiple different brands operating, modeled against what Laguna Phuket was or Laguna Bintan was.
Sure.
And we would love to do something similar in India. As the Indian market grows outside the major metros, we would love to have something similar as well.
Okay.
And again, it comes back as well what we talked earlier, especially if you look at international tourism, but also even for domestic, is your airlift. And this is one of the great success stories of Dubai, that we have Emirates Airlines that has driven just so much business that we're now doing 60 million people through the airport, of which 10 million come out every year. And I think governments really need to understand, as much as they need to free up visas, they need to stop support of legacy airlines and let airlines be private industries and private businesses and operate as long as they meet the safety standards.
Right. Let's turn our attention to looking at what kind of hotels. Jim, you've got a fair portfolio of extended stay properties. You think the time is right to look at extended stay? Is that a segment that you're...
Yeah, we're the largest operator in the U.S. of extended stay. I think we've got 60 or so Marriott Residence Inns. We've got another 20 or so Homewood Suites by Hilton. So we're a big player in that segment, and you know, that I think launched in the 1980s. So from a branding perspective, it's a fairly new product, only 30-some years old. But we, yeah, my view of internationally, that extended stay product just hasn't worked well outside of the U.S. I think here service departments are clearly a product that's here to stay, but it's a much different product than an extended stay hotel or a branded extended stay hotel property. I just haven't seen it be successful, and I don't think we're going to see it come to India or to China anytime soon in emerging markets. I don't think it's an emerging market brand. It isn't the way people live as they do in America. People are much more mobile. There's a lot more fluidity in the markets. So while it's a great and profitable brand and segment in the U.S., it just hasn't translated even in Europe or elsewhere. So I think the long-term stay of a service department's got a better value, and there just isn't a room between a transient hotel, if you will, accommodation and a service department, and that's where it sits. We just haven't seen the market dynamics yet.
Not yet.
Support that. So I don't know. I think there has to be some cultural shifts before I think we're ready for that product outside of North America.
Okay. Meinhard, looking only at greenfield projects, or would you also look at some existing assets, reflagging, repositioning them?
Yes, we do rebranding. We've done rebranding very successful in several parts of the world. That's obviously that's one of our modules. If I can just add on the service departments, we manage several service departments within our portfolio, and we call them Swissotel Living. And the good thing about our service departments is that in general terms, they have a high occupancy and a fairly high rate, because people are staying for a longer period of time. I mean, the one we have in Istanbul is running about 85% occupancy at an average rate of 545 euro. The one in Foshan is running at about 90% occupancy. So I think for us, the living is something which is very important. And coming back to your question, yes, conversion is something which for us is, the good news about conversion is the hotel is already there.
Okay.
Okay, it's not a hole in the ground for the next 5 years.
Right, right. And Jim, you'd look at that together with some of the brands, or?
Pardon me?
You'd look at conversions rather than greenfield?
Conversions are important to us as well. And you know, with the ideal opportunity for us here to double our footprint in India would be finding the right footprint or platform. You know, outside of the US, outside of India, we've been working on a lot of M&A. We bought 3 companies in the last 18 months in the US that gave us 170 new contracts. We just bought a company in the UK. We've got one more right behind it that has given us the largest footprint in the UK of the third-party operators. There isn't the same opportunity in India because there's not the typical third-party operator. So our idea of M&A here is if we can find the right portfolio of hotels, go in with a partner that would take the real estate and allow us to monetize the management company, and leave it with the owner, if you will, to focus on development. We hope to see that kind of evolution of the Indian owner developer to get out of the operations, focus on where the money's made, that's on the development side and the real estate ownership side, and leave the operations to us. So if there's an opportunity for consolidation, that would be our #1 focus here to greatly expand our footprint. Consolidation and roll-up is a big part of our strategy. Much more fragmented here, but if the right opportunity, and we think there might be some, that would be our #1 objective.
Okay. Okay.
We've been doing quite a few conversions as well, like the Grosvenor House, Jumeirah Living Apartments in London,
right,
as well as even the Carlton Tower and Lounge, but plus also now Rome and Istanbul with the
So would you look at that
Hotel.
in India?
And these are existing hotels that have been redeveloped and then branded
right.
Jumeirah, so very much so. Yeah.
So you're open to that?
Yes, very much.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
All right, fair enough. Given the time that we're left with, let me just ask one final question. In terms of adapting the product to the local market, what do you chaps think you'll need to look at to ensure that your brand standards are relevant to India? Especially, I mean, I ask this especially because of the burning issue that this is from an owner's perspective. Oh, we have time out. So you're saved. One line, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, I think, you know, in dealing with all the brands, I think one of the most challenging brand standards over the long term is going to be service. You know, there's a competition for employees. We see a lot of employees moving around. Training and development and retention of employees to maintain a high quality of service is going to be the most difficult challenge going forward. Employment used to be plentiful. I think it's a lot more restricted to get talented people, and they'll move to a new job for 200 rupees a week. So I think that's going to be the challenge for delivering brand standards, I think, in the future. Okay.
As I mentioned earlier, just by the nature of the business we're in, at the level, at the end of the business we're in, each hotel is individual, each hotel is different, and certainly we have to adjust for the market in which we're in, but naturally we have our minimum standards, we have our golden thread. I also think we're very fortunate within the company that we have so many, we have several thousand Indian nationals working for us in Dubai, so we have very selected people, many of them in senior positions, that we can also select to take back to India as we develop here.
Okay. I'm going to have to be quick because I don't want to hold people up from coffee. Abid and Meinhard, maybe you want to share.
In our brand, sense of place is very, very, very critical, starting from the architectural, service elements, all that. We are very big at that because that's part of the experience that we deliver. So that goes without saying. relative to developing talent domestically, much like Gerald talked about, we've got lots of our colleagues all around the world that are Indian ethnicities. We could bring them back and develop people locally. Also, our management academy that is operating in Phuket, we bring our colleagues from all over the world there for leadership type of training, and that'll continue to go on. But I think that's being sensitive of the environment that you operate in is critical.
Okay. Meinhard.
I'll be quick. Obviously, within our brand, we have very strong brand standards. But as I mentioned earlier, when in the local market, we respect the local history and the heritage, and we work with the local people to sort of develop a sense of feeling that when you come into India and you go into one of our hotels, you know you're in a Swissotel, but you also know that you're in India or in China or wherever we are. As for colleagues, the same thing here. We have a number of colleagues, Indian colleagues working around the world. They're being trained and we bring them back to work in India, which we have done in our property in Kolkata just recently. And we also work with hotel universities. We are partnering with the Husni University in Turkey, for example. We work with École Hôtelière in Lausanne, and we sponsor a class in Beijing. So we're very much active in developing local people, because at the end of the day, that's where the expertise lies.
Okay. And not to take the last word, but let's remember as well that the Indian service industry, hotel industry, already has very high standards of service, and the market very high expectations of what we will deliver.
Okay, excellent. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I think time is out. It's time for coffee and some caffeine. Thank you.
Thank you.